favors the Firebrand package, whereas Surrender favors the Dragon package. But in terms of the way their Demon Hunters are built, they both have that Consume Magic in there and no Magtheridon. It's just going to be a lot of good old-fashioned back and forth games. What I will say, though, is when I was finding the small thing I could criticize about Surrender in terms of the pressure maybe getting to him, that is something that never scratches Tom in the slightest. He is cool as a cucumber every single time we see him on stream. And whether it or not it leads to a play we agree with, we can be certain that Tom is confident.
Cucumbers look at Tom wishing they could be as Sub-Zero as he is. He is absolutely unflappable in the entirety of Grandmasters. No matter how high the pressure gets, he's always just seeming completely unaffected by it, no matter what happens. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've seen perfect play from him. Again, I don't want to pick him up on it too much, but some cracks were starting to show this weekend, and hopefully for his sake, we can see it straightened out, because we also saw some very, very high-level play from him over the course of the weekend. Another matchup here that we've been seeing plenty of, having plenty of healthy discussion about, I'm sure, with the Mage up against Demon Hunter. Definitely feel like it's been going the way of Mage more often than not, actually, recently.
It's true. The last time we saw Tom play out this matchup, I honestly disagreed with the amount of damage he was sending into minions, but we saw the same from Alutamo, and it also looked really weird to me. It's very possible that there's just a way that certain players have developed of playing the matchup that I haven't tried out, but maybe it's worked for them off of stream and unfortunately didn't work out on stream. We'll see if this game can allow for any experimentation from Tom, but right out the gate, he has a pretty good start with the double jailers.
Yeah, very much what you're looking for. The placement of his cards is a little annoying, because you'd like to play out the Shard Shatter, I think, just so you can cycle with the Consume Magic in the Outcast position, and of course, get your Skull into a more healthy Outcast position in itself. But the Ooze makes it a lot more amenable for the time being. He can just continue curving out, and this chip damage is worth a tremendous amount in the early game.
Yeah, I mean, Surrender visibly wincing at an Ooze for no value. That's just how much he respects the damage. Every single point in the early game can lead to the difference between one-off lethal or lethal itself in the late game.
And for the Wand Maker, I was kind of looking at Magic Trick there, I've got to say, to try and hit Combustion, Frostbolt, Brain Freeze, something like that, but just maximum development once again for Surrender instead.
Yeah, I do like this line. Getting down the Solarian seems pretty high value because it challenges the 1-3. For Tom, though, it so happens that there was nothing else he wanted to spend this last mana on other than the hero power, and he gets a good Consume Magic target. At the very least, though, the Wand Maker can challenge the Ooze for the next turn. It's just annoying for Surrender that double Learn Draconic is extremely slow here.
His whole hand is just kind of slow. That's a welcome pickup, if just to answer the Mana Feeder with the Lab Partner on the other side of the board, but still a little ways off from actually being board swinging quite yet.
Correct. You could just treat it like a Brain Freeze, but since he still has that 1 mana extra, I like that he starts with the Magic Trick. Think you take AI here?
Oh, I'm kind of looking at Frost Nova, actually. I think with Giant in hand and Evocation, like, I want a swing turn where I can stick Giant and just freeze my opponent's board instead of having to answer it.
It's fair, but I'm just not sure what the next turn is if you take the Frost Nova, because it's gonna be a while before you can do Giant plus Nova all at once.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I guess I was counting the Mana Giant on being a little bit cheaper by this point. Fair enough.
Face, Tom? Is it time?
It's happening. It's finally happening. At this point, you know, there was the decision on this turn of if you just play out the Shard Shatter to unlock the Skull for the following turn. But I think he's going to be real happy to just play Shard Shatter with whatever's on board on the following turn, and then go for Skull the turn after.
I'm on board for that. Boy, oh boy, does Surrender wish he had a Pram session instead. But the Arcane Intellect is, I guess, mana spent towards the side quest.
What to do?
He's clearly thinking about just ripping Evocation now, because that could be instant side quest activation, and sometimes just the Giant down immediately too, because Coin will help the Giant cheapen, I think.
Mm.
Very unlikely though, because you would have to hit a bunch of one-cost spells to go Evocation and Giant for free. But you could go for some half measure of like a couple one-costs from the Evocation plus Giant. But then you have to ask, what is the value of the Evocation in the first place? Because you could simply coin Giant and call it a day.
He's taking it right now though. I mean, there are a lot of one-mana spells that generate that extra value, but he's got to find them.
And when I was asking about what's the value of Evocation altogether, if you don't necessarily get the Giant down, it's completing the side quest. That was what he was thinking about. And he does get side quest altogether. So push onto the board from Tom. From Surrender, sorry.
Fair play from him as well. Like, that was a powerful turn in terms of clearing the board. Damage phase 6/6. Jandis found as well is really not to be sniffed at. It could be side quest Jandis plus Giant on the following turn.
Oh, this draw from Tom. 10 to face? It's not lethal next turn necessarily, but it's so tempting.
Demons?
It's scary though, right? Because the counter pressure is there. If your opponent just goes Ray of Frost on your 5/5 and hits you for 7, with whatever development they have alongside that, you're very possibly just dead if you play the Skull on the next turn.
It's true. So if he plays Skull this turn, does he ever get lethal? I don't think he has enough mana to do so. So the upside of playing Skull this turn is to set up for a bigger Blade Dance the next turn, if not immediately.
Time grows short.
Final line
if he does go for the 10 to face, this gives him, I believe, a Pain out off the top.
It gives him a few outs, right? Like any of the weapons, Chaos Strike, Twin Slice. There's quite a bit here that can do it.
Definitely.
What makes
Surrender, going for the Jandis. That he generated. I didn't even notice that was generated. No taunts though.
Yeah, I mean, they're fine. They're pretty decent minions in a normal instance, but he knows that he is very possibly about to die now.
Such a big deal that the Learn Draconic minion can take a value trade over the 5/5, which means that Surrender can take the 5/5 off this turn and also just present counter lethal. Put it on the captain again? I'm not sure. What he's worried about now is Blade Dance, either way.
So I guess just recurring villain because it's less attack.
That's true. No matter which way you look at it, Blade Dance is scary. Oh man, how many outs are there for Tom? Glavebound also is an out.
Okay.
5 fragments in the deck, so only 19 real cards. That's one of them.
That's just it. Very nice 2-turn setup here from Tom, doing what the deck, we'd been saying it should be doing in the matchup, and even just a BM Soul Shard Lapidary off the top to really rub it in versus Surrender there. This is what we think the Demon Hunter... Of course. This is what it's been missing. The early pressure into damage to face. It feels like the players have been playing a much more board control heavy route, which in a world of mana giants and Conjurer's Callings is just not quite consistent enough, I think, when compared to the pure heavy damage route.
That's the opinion I've landed on, at least. I'm not sure if something changed with Tom between yesterday and today, or maybe, most likely, this situation was just different for him, which led to him going for the face plan. But I think it says a lot about whether or not you focus on getting Skull down as soon as possible, depending on the matchup. Because in the Demon Hunter mirror, where they have pretty consistent ways of being able to heal back up and make the all-face damage game plan more complicated for you. I do favor getting Skull down as soon as possible, but against Mage, where they do have to generate Ice Barriers or Frost Bolts that don't start naturally in the deck, in general, you can find it pretty safe to go all-face there. For Tom, there was just that one decision of whether he was supposed to play the Shard Shatter Mystic earlier to unlock the Skull, but he just focused on the average outcome of Mage not having ways to heal back up and was greatly rewarded for it.
Yeah, I think the way that Tom ended up playing it was just pretty much spot on for the most part. Like, even that last turn we were talking about, you can go for Skull to set up for the Blade Dance. He was like, well, if I play this, I have like 8 outs for lethal on the following turn, and that's if they can find a good answer to my 5/5 on the board, which involved trading the 6/6 in as well. Just worked out very, very cleanly, I think, there for Tom. And unfortunate for Surrender that he wasn't able to deal with that early damage. I do think, to be fair, he could have taken a line in the earlier turns that was at least searching for a more immediate damage reduction route, because on turn 3, where he went Wandmaker into the Solarian, it put forward a very strong board presence, which is worth a lot to answer on the following turn, but it didn't immediately stop any damage, which maybe Magic Trick could have found. It was kind of a close one. So I don't think I'm going to begrudge him too much for that one, because he was trying to swing things back at the cost of a little bit of health.
Yeah, it was very close. Just one turn off for Surrender being able to go for the counter lethal. It was not a clear evocation play. I think whether or not he had the time to play AI was very dependent on what Tom's next turn would be. Because it was Lapidary, I think Surrender thought that he had to turn up the gas and really get his giant down as soon as possible. And he gave it the best shot he could. But now we move on to game 2, where it looks like Tom will be the one on the mage and Surrender on the demon hunter. And we've had many questions for Tom's mage play as well.
We have. It's definitely been a bit of a weak spot for him yesterday, but before Gia and I prattle on endlessly about it, as quite clearly we are wont to do, we're going to go to a quick break before we head into game 2 of the series. This is once again the first semi-final of the day. The winner will be going straight through to the final to try and fight for that spot at the World Championships. Could it be a back-to-back for Surrender 2 years in a row, or can Tom get a repeat performance finally back on the world stage later this year? We'll see after this. This is the first semi-final of the day here, and we've just had a pretty one-sided matchup of the Demon Hunter against the Mage, and it appears that we now have Mage against Demon Hunter. It's just going to be straight up the other way around here, with Surrender trying to get the win in, you'd have to imagine, a similar fashion, and hope that Tom can't go for too much of an impactful early game, which quite clearly is showing to be the crucial point in the matchup, is whether the Mage can survive those early turns.
And the more we've seen this matchup, which we've gone back and forth on whether we think the Mage or the Demon Hunter is favored, the more I've come to appreciate the importance of the early board. I feel like most of the time when we've seen Mage take what we once thought was unfavorable was when they managed to stick the lab partners and deal with the Wand Maker Spirit Jailers on the other side with the cheap and efficient spells. So I'm very interested if Tom's Firebrand can maybe put some work in the early game, because it's a one-card answer to the types of double Wand Maker boards, for example.
Yep, could be a big deal. I'm really just looking for any of those early developmental plays in the first few turns. Running one Spellwing could be a little bit of a hindrance to Tom's ability to lock down that early board. But for the most part, all the usual suspects are there. All the spell damage minions, Cyclone Apprentice, all that good stuff that you're looking to do. The difference, of course, between the two lists, as you highlighted earlier on, is the Firebrand, but also, arguably more importantly, the Conjurer's Calling for Surrender. For Tom, as opposed to the Dragon package for Surrender, which I think, in my opinion, still does somewhat favor tom60229, because I know that the Arcane Breaths can discover some of those key cards that we keep talking about, like Frostbolt and Ice Barrier, but Giant Conjurer's Calling is the game ender. That's the full stop on your entire game plan as Mage.
No, it's true. I mean, when we saw Flurry versus Alutemu and Flurry took it as Mage, he got the win by generating Conjurer's Calling, which, to be fair, he did run one natural one in the deck, but he was able to consistently set up very threatening boards that couldn't be simply blade danced away, and that sealed the first game, at least, in his favor. For Tom, I'd love the Shanvala keep. The Arcane Intellect alongside it is quite interesting, though, because I tend to favor playing Shanvala as soon as possible in this matchup, and Arcane Intellect to follow it up isn't the strongest because you'd rather activate it.
Right. I mean, it gets a little bit... Wow, okay. Apprentice being picked up is huge. But I was going to say, if you have Apprentice, obviously you can just go insane and make a whole bunch of them. The rules don't apply. But very often when you're on the coin, for me at least, Shanvala is a turn 4 play when you can get one immediate activation with coin double spell. And AI does set up for that, to be fair, on turn 4. It does, however, mean you're going to be tanking a lot of damage in the early game before that can happen.
It's fair. I think also whether or not you can afford to play Shanvala on the coin on turn 2 depends on how much development there was on the Demon Hunter side, and Surrender has curved out pretty much perfectly, so I'm on board with saving it for the Apprentice turn now. Is this just a ping?
It's either ping or magic trick, which could obviously find you Ray of Frost, Brain Freeze, missiles to try and take a little bit less damage. Or it could just be a Tempo Apprentice.
This was the other question I had. Because it looks extremely strange, but to be fair, he has the second one. So he can definitely still pop off when Shanvala as long as he holds the magic trick, right? It's almost guaranteed on the turn 4. So I don't know. I mean, I don't hate this. It just looks really strange.
It's so weird. I'm having to shift my entire frame of reference of how to process this matchup now, because, you know, we were talking about stopping damage. This will stop damage. Surrender will do literally everything in his power to kill this Sorcerer's Apprentice. So technically, he achieved what I was trying to set out to do.
I mean, it's true. And this is purely because Tom has the second one in hand. Make no mistake that he feels that off the back of Shanvala First Apprentice, he can win the game, which I think is a reasonable assumption. It is so much stats on the board. I'm just curious, what is going through Surrender's head right now? Because you see an Apprentice played down. Is their hand garbage, or is it so insane that they have the freedom to throw out one?
It's so hard. Like, I'm trying to figure out in my head if you can make the read that next turn is the power turn that you have to mana burn and not this turn, because keeping a card in the hand here, do you make the read that it's Apprentice and that's why he threw down the other one, because he already has the other one and he's going for a massive Apprentice coin Cyclone turn? Do you make the read that it's Shanvala so you have to stop it on turn 4? I think on average Surrender has made the correct play of trying to mana burn at a later point instead here.
Right. I think the question is it worth mana burn and miss your Marrow Slicer this turn? He
Surely
can
not.
definitely have a read that there is something cooking in Surrender's hand. But the thing is, if you mana burn this turn, they take a turn off. You're facing the same problem next turn, and you end up equipping the Marrow Slicer anyway. The difference is you've gotten 4 extra damage through to face, and is that enough?
Demons?
It just can't be correct, can it? Surely you have to go Marrow Slicer.
Yeah. Surely, yeah. I mean, no matter what the pop-off is, whether it's Shenvala or Apprentice Cyclone, they can probably just do more the next turn if you delay it. And again, the only upside for delaying it a turn is the minion damage you have on board, which Surrender has no way of developing more than 4 attacks. So I would land on the Marrow Slicer. He's going to be sad about it, but what can you do, right?
I think even if you can see the hands, the play is still Marrow Slicer, because it sets up for Marrow Slicer this turn, Marrow Slicer mana burn on 5, and then Skull on 6. I appreciate that Surrender, he fully well knows that something is about to happen on this turn. He make no illusion about that. That's not why he's holding the mana burn. It's because it's too much mana floated otherwise.
Yep. First trick, learn Draconic. Nice.
Sure. Yep, pretty good. The double activation dream is still alive with Ray of Frost being found. That is big.
That's so huge. Double activation surrenders like, all right, Tom.
Right,
There's
we're looking
a Blade Dance top deck.
Yeah, Blade Dance is what we're after here. I'm a little surprised actually to see Tom go double Ray on the same target instead of trying to freeze 2 of the guys there, because now the Apprentice can just be killed, whereas otherwise he could have made it so that either the Shenvala or the Apprentice could be killed, but not both in with what was represented.
If also it's just better against Blade Dance to freeze 2 minions, because they could just double trade into Apprentice, and Hero Power Blade Dance is a full clear. So still possible for Surrender. Hero Power, Mana Feeder, 1 last top deck, 2 mana remaining.
Do you even go for that though? On this turn, like,
I grow impatient.
Maybe you have to ditch the mana burn Marrow Slicer play because the hero power is too valuable.
Yeah, I mean, if you miss it this turn, Marrow Slicer Blade Dance next turn is not enough to deal with everything, because he wouldn't have the mana for the hero power. But I kind of feel like he can't afford to take the 12. I don't know. Okay, gonna do it.
Leaving up the
Shenvala, re-equip Marrow Slicer. And Tom just has his choice of the best 5 drops to follow up. My goodness.
He doesn't though. This is the point of Surrender's play. The mana burn brings him down to 3, sorry. And so this is really the only thing kind of keeping Surrender in the game right now, is the fact that this is a relatively weak turn from Tom.
It's still not that weak. Sorry, my brain completely blanked on the mana burn, but this is still so much pressure.
Yeah.
But again, there's still some outs. Skull picking up Shard Shatter Mystic ×2, or Shard Shatter plus Blade Dance could be a clear.
Yep, literally any attack buff plus Blade Dance would do the job as well, aside from Soul Shard, obviously, due to mana restrictions. It's going to be a real close one. All those soul fragments in the deck as well. What are there, like 7 or 8 of them at this point? It's going to make it really difficult to get any kind of value off this Skull as well.
No choice, though.
It's the only play, I think.
Alas, poor wolf.
Close your eyes. Nope. That's the game.
He didn't hit a single soul fragment, but still, it's just not enough. No mana at all to work with. That is just game.
You can't remove any additional damage from the board other than the 2 trades and the swing, but the swing puts him within lethal range for whatever's remaining, so that is just game.
I yield.
For Tom there, I think he played it out pretty much, pretty cleanly. The Apprentice, I think, was a real stroke of genius in the mid-game to allow him to go for that plan without dying. But for Surrender on the other side, such difficult turns. Do you go for the Mana Burn over the Marrow Slicer? I don't think so. Do you dig for the Blade Dance off of the Mana Feeder? I don't think so, but maybe he was so far behind that was his best chance of winning the game.
Yeah, it's really tough to say. I was definitely caster visioning when I said he needs Blade Dance because I could see that the damage follow-up was there for Tom. From Surrender's perspective, maybe if he just kills the Shenvala and Tom doesn't keep developing, then he can give himself more outs to find Blade Dance. But Tom just had no shortage of pressure. Whether or not there was mana burn, he was going to add more threats to the board, make it so that even if there was a Blade Dance, there'd be too many minions. So it had to be exactly Shard Shatter plus Blade Dance to do a good enough job to get rid of everything. And that is yet another time that Mage has gotten the better of Demon Hunter. But Surrender now has to reverse sweep the Rogue if he wants to go to the finals.
It's not looking good. Surrender, or Tom having taken the win both as the Demon Hunter versus the Mage, and the Mage versus the Demon Hunter, with two pretty disgusting starts on either side, has put himself in a great position now. But Surrender's got a nice start here on the Mage. He can get off to some very powerful tempo swings.
Right. I'm thinking he keeps the 2 in the middle, and that's it.
That makes a decent amount of sense to me. Like, obviously, you generally want to find the minions that synergize with Sorcerer's Apprentice, like Shenvala, Mana Cyclone, Giant, things like that. But Ray of Frost is kind of a uniquely powerful card with Apprentice.
Really is, and I'd put more emphasis on keeping that if Surrender, or like the importance of it. I still wouldn't keep it if Surrender was off coin, but it's even scarier to not have that if there is potential for a big Edwin on the other side. But I think that Surrender would more likely be looking for card draw instead, and he tosses even the studies here.
Wow.
Which, that's interesting. I can understand the reasoning behind it. I tend to like keeping studies just as near guaranteed early play and activator for Cram Session, but if you don't have the session itself, the minion presence might not be impactful enough.
Yeah, I am generally a fan of just keeping Primordial Studies as one of the better cards in the deck. When you specifically have Apprentice, though, in a way it gets better because you can play it for 0 mana, but in a way it gets worse because it's a card that isn't Shenvala or Evocation or even Cyclone, arguably, as well.
Right. Studies is definitely not a synergy keep with Apprentice. It's kind of like you're keeping half of the cards for a curve and the other half for the combo potential later on.
This is interesting for Surrender, right? Because the obvious play is ping pass.
What to do?
The secret that your opponent kept, though, if it's plagiarized, you obviously want to play just one spell on this turn so that they get very little value from it. But they kept it in the mulligan and played it on 2. Is that ever going to be plagiarized?
Might even be ambushed. Tom runs one of them.
Oh, true. Yeah, good point.
At some point, though, and I think that point is now, Surrender's going to play a spell, and he'll get a lot of knowledge based on what happens at the end of this turn. Question is whether he shoots the Cult Neophyte or just generates a minion. The Arcane Breath doesn't get much value, but I tend to like just removing this.
Oh, there's so much going on. Like, the fact that it is specifically the Neophyte is a big deal because you want it to die so they can't Shadow Step it.
Right.
I think Surrender probably has a pretty strong read on it being Dirty Tricks at this point, given that it was a card that was kept in the mulligan against Mage. I don't think either of the other secrets are quite worth it, but maybe you'd keep Plagiarize, even though it's not that strong on turn 2 specifically. Yeah. So he doesn't want to give cards by playing a spell.
Right. He's just clearly leading up to a big pop-off in the near future, right? So I think the potential of losing one spell this turn or the Cyclone next turn, just to make sure that it's not plagiarized, would be worth it in my eyes. But looks like he might even just ping this over 2 turns.
Crazy stuff. Love to know what's going on in his mind right now.
Too.
Oh, up to no good? Me too.
Ambush also plays on the mind, right? Because if you don't keep both the Arcane Breath, it's not guaranteed that you get to kill the ambush the turn you go off with the Cyclone. But because Surrender still doesn't know whether or not this is plagiarized, he can't go off this turn. Surely he's got to play a spell now, right?
You'd think so. I mean, you've... Oh, wow. Okay, this is getting crazy. So just ping Arcane Breath is probably where his head is at. Again, he does not want to give spells to his opponent through the dirty tricks. He wants to starve his opponent of resources for as long as possible.
But if it's just gonna be delay, 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 and not go off, I guess he has quite a bit of time. Tom has indicated this is not an Edwin hand, but you can only wait so long, right?
I wonder.
Arcane Breath, Cult Neophyte, ping the Lackey. At the very least, you have one Shanvala activation the next turn. Although the hand can even be sometimes go off on turn 6, so you can do Cyclone Apprentice and Shanvala. He did the Tom thing! Oh my goodness, what's happening today?
Ping. I mean, this tests for 2 of the secrets, right? He now has 100% information to work with on the following turn.
Yeah, and that means he's free to pop off. But it comes at the cost of an Apprentice, which you have both Cyclone and Shanvala in hand. It feels...
So interesting. Really was so interesting. And how you even go about this is really tough in its own right. Like, I feel like it's probably a Cyclone turn instead of a Shanvala turn. I don't think you're getting quite enough value out of it to lose all these cards.
I agree. It's a single 5/5 that he gets here, because the Arcane Breaths aren't discovering anything else with no dragon. So I would agree, especially with the Mana Giant draw, that he wants to get maximum spell generation instead.
Does he ever go Shanvala Ping Pass?
Looks like it? Huh?
Wow.
Oh, okay, it's just a Shanvala turn instead of a Cyclone turn. I thought he was gonna go Shanvala, but that didn't make sense. Oh my gosh, he picked up a dragon! That's so big!
He hit the dragon. He was definitely banking on this happening this turn, and the possibilities now are truly endless. I mean, spectators having to play catch up with him here, with the amount of cards he's generating now.
Yeah, he still needs a 1-cost... okay, he doesn't hit the double activation. This was risky.
Really
There's
was.
Azure Explorer and Malagos, I believe, as a spell damage dragons. And he would have to get pretty lucky with the Arcane Breath if you have a dragon at all to go for double activation. But to be fair, he's picked up some pretty good plays in the next turns.
Man, it's an interesting turn though, isn't it? Like, he has left himself with a relatively clunky hand here, and Tom can start to do some pretty powerful stuff. This Secret Passage, complementing his already very well-developed board, could get him Edwin in the Absolute Dream, Hanar, Miscreant, Questing, so many strong cards to pick up.
Surrender is super stressed out. Play everything?
Don't let the door hit you.
All but one, right? I think you'd happily play the Cult Neophyte here.
Muzzle their magic.
Neophyte. Backbreaking for Surrender. It's been little incremental damage for Tom every turn, but because he has delayed Surrender this long, it should be enough to get over the finish line.
Absolutely could be this ambush as well, really not to be sniffed at as a somewhat mediocre Jandis comes down. It's not game-winning quite yet. But Tom is looking in a great spot.
Hanar into One Thief. You can get a secret off of One Thief sometimes.
You can.
I think it's well worth trying.
Ooh.
Wait a minute. How much damage does he have on board?
Yeah.
I guess the answer is enough.
Enough. Surrender here. If he can hit Gyrocopter off of Power of Creation, is that enough? I don't think so.
Walker?
Yeah.
Kartut Defender?
Safeguard. Like, we're getting pretty out there already.
barely even get to see the Frost Elemental come out there. No outs for Surrender towards the end there. And my goodness, that game was so tense at the beginning. Long delays from Surrender trying to starve Tom of resources. Didn't pan out in the end though, and Tom takes an extremely clean 3-0 sweep over our best performing player this season.
I honestly didn't have time to even let it sink in. It's over before it feels like it's even began. And tom60229 is through to the finals of our second season of Grandmasters here in 2020. A single series away from taking his rightful spot back at the World Championships. While my heart breaks for Surrender, it's another season where he's so close to getting through to the World Championships, but just falls short at the final hurdle here. It is a tremendous run, though, for tom60229. I cannot wait to see him represent APAC at the World Championships.
An incredibly worthy representative if he does make it, because there is still one more match to be played out. Tom's challenger will be between Chonsu or Bank Yugi. Already so many interesting spots throughout the day. Already highs and lows, because we started with a relegation match and now we've sent Tom through to the finals. But now we find out